which relates to education. We are very much disappointed by the grade 7 results. I think this we have said that sometimes we've seen as individuals on Twitter. We believe that the less than 38, 37 point something % pass rate in grade 7 is actually something that was called upon all of us to realize that something is not right in our education system. And because of that, we believe as NCA that that result is what can be called a tip of the iceberg, if we use that expression, showing that things are not right there. And we would rightly describe it as a national disaster, and everyone must regard it as such. Now, as the NCA, we're a social democratic party, we believe that a proper education system is one of the important aspects of raising people out of poverty, raising communities out of poverty. And that's one of our belief systems. So if you want to undermine the poor and the marginalized, give them an improperly structured education. If you look at those results, they will tell you that many of our underprivileged communities are the ones that suffered most. So where would you go? But others would be privileged. If you look at what you see on Facebook and so forth, you get 1. Even our spokesperson here got a son getting 1. But these are just a small section of the community. And then that is very much worrying. So where do we place the blame? We would want to place the blame squarely, largely on the ZANU-PF government in respect of these results of the grade 7 results. Why are we placing the blame on the ZANU-PF government? We are doing that because there has been what I can call a systematic neglect of the education sector. In the first 10 years of independence, the ZANU-PF government under President Mugabe did very well. We are products of that system of education that was there. But suddenly from the 1990s onwards, they started neglecting it with a lot of concentration in other areas, but more so going into government, not so much to look at these very serious issues about what's happening in our education sector. That was not the primary thing. And that's when you get so much high levels of corruption. So we believe, and this is the charge that we want to make, that ZANU-PF has been engaged in a systematic neglect of our education sector. And that systematic neglect, which has been building over the years, is reflected in the last year's grade 7 results. It's not so much about COVID or so much about it is more to do with a clear decaying framework that suddenly blows out. And I think if some people are not careful, they will think they will look for short-term explanations. We believe that that must not be. It must be a long-term explanation. Where has that come from? There has been a systematic reduction in the salaries that are paid to people in the education sector. We all know this. There's also been a senseless way of dealing with the real concerns of the teachers. I mean, you know how the last year's strikes were handled. And those are the things. It's a typical way of doing it. You also look at the school infrastructure. Some of the pictures coming on social media, you would not believe that in this country we have schools like that. Now, if you create an environment like that for learning, you cannot expect to produce anything and so forth. Then, currently as we speak, there is actually the absence of a strategy of our education in the face of COVID-19. There is absolutely nothing. And the government is not working on that strategy. You can have people talking about online education, which is the language that is used by everyone. Again, we build an elite society. As NCA, we believe that they still import an important framework to look at, even in the face of COVID-19, face-to-face education in many of our marginalized communities is still mandatory and unavoidable. You cannot do without that. So we must sit as a country and say, what exactly do we do? And we call upon all stakeholders to approach this. What is worrying us as a party is that in other societies, even in the heat of this, there are visible steps that are taking place in trying to get kids back to school in safe environments. We have not that here. And I think all of you in the media, you know what's happening in South Africa. And I was following what was happening there. And there were parents, of course, who were complaining that it is not safe. But there's already some strategy, which you keep getting. This is absent. And there we would want to call upon the government to put in place a framework where they involve all interested stakeholders in coming up with an education strategy in the face of COVID-19, with a view to realizing that our marginalized communities still require face-to-face education. And you cannot make it a golden thing. So no, we do online, when you know that the majority of our people would not be able to do that. Then finally, our third thing we are addressing as NCA is political dialogue. And this is the last aspect. We believe that there is need for political dialogue in the country in view of the deteriorating and continuing deterioration of our economic situation. The lives of Zimbabweans are still quite difficult to survive, you know that. And I'm not going to bore you down with the kind of situation we are in at the moment. One of the worst scenarios that we saw yesterday or the day before yesterday was a statement, I don't know whether that's a correct statement, coming from government where they were declaring the state of the roads a national disaster or something like that. It's a very meaningless thing. They should just attend to the roads, but just get the rains. And then they expose that we have no roads in more than 70% of our country. No roads, no nothing. Bridges are falling apart. You also saw that disastrous thing in Chimanimani, where there was an accident. I think you saw that. Someone is killed because the road framework was not done properly, etc. These are some of the problems that we're facing.